Pluto is the reimagining of a story arc from Amazu Tezuka's classic manga series Astro Boy, specifically the Greatest Robots on Earth arc. Urasawa Naoki's Pluto takes the original story, expands it, and adds more mature and nuanced themes towards it, along with a far more intricate narrative, exploring themes of humanity and identity through the exploration of artificial intelligence. Urasawa is celebrated as a complex storyteller, and he's a veteran of the murder mystery genre. He's most commonly known, and how I knew him, was from his work on Monster. The anime Monster is an undeniable classic that has held an unflinching spot in the top 25 anime of all time, according to my anime list. I personally watched it to completion and fell in love with its wide array of characters. My favorite is Grimmer, for obvious reasons, but it was also really refreshing to watch because it's an anime that was set outside of Japan. It was set in Germany, of all places. Parts of the story take place during and after the fall of the Berlin Wall. This, combined with its insanely compelling story, made for just an instant standout. And needless to say, Pluto is in great hands. But I was skeptical of one thing: its short episode count. Monster has close to 80 episodes, so I was a little anxious to see how Urasawa would adapt to a more condensed storytelling pattern. Would he be able to adapt to telling a comparably complex story in a mere 8 episodes? My worries about this show, however, never came to fruition, and this is the unforgettable story of Pluto. This story is crazy, and I don't want to spoil anything for you. What's the point of watching a murder mystery if you already know the ending? There isn't any. Due to that fact, I can't go into any insane detail on the show. However, the story is so complex that there is still so much I can talk about. Now, a little known fact, Pluto takes place in the same universe as Astro Boy, or at the very least, an alternative version of the same universe. This is a world where robotic AI is absurdly present, and it's present in many forms. We see things that look like an analog computer moving around, something akin to an old school games console. And then we see a hyper undetectable realistic computer intelligence, one of which is our main character Gesicht. In this universe, these robots live in families and coexist with humans. There seems to be class issues at play, and this tension between these two groups is present throughout the entire story. The main storyline follows a character known as Gesicht, a highly advanced detective robot, as he investigates a series of gruesome murders targeting both humans and robots alike. These murders seem to have some form of common cause, especially between the robotic victims. 7 of the most advanced robots are being targeted by this murderer, and although in the story we get to see and get to know every single one of them, as they themselves do their best in helping Gesicht uncover the mystery. I absolutely adore the fact that this story isn't centered around Astro Boy himself, or known in this story as Atom. Astro Boy is actually a translation or renaming of Atom. And I'm not gonna lie, I never knew that Astro Boy was part of this story at all. I didn't even know he was involved in this universe. I just kept thinking to myself, holy crap, that kid just really reminds me of Astro Boy. And honestly, I think my experience was only benefited by this fact, knowing that there was a pivotal character known all across the world and was involved in an insane amount of story and media, may have in some way sullied the experience of having Gesicht as the main character. It made it feel like there was actual stakes at hand. While watching recent movie and TV shows, it's simply apparent that the main character is basically always going to live, always is going to be fine, and is always going to fix the problem. Going into the show, this removes any form of stake that may have existed in the initial narrative for the individual. I never felt that way with this story though. It keeps you on your toes and always questioning, always guessing. And you're always going to need to pay attention at all moments because you are going to miss stuff while watching this show. You might see things that steer you in the complete wrong direction as to where you think the story itself is going to go. I took a break halfway through the show and talked about what we thought was going to happen with a friend of mine. We had two entirely different perspectives on what had and was going to happen, had happened. We saw the same thing and had two different interpretations of a objective media. We watched the same thing. We paid attention to different parts of it. But this is due to the fact that I believe in the first few episodes of the show, you are unbelievably swarmed with world building and character depth. These first few episodes can leave you overwhelmed and flustered, but I think this is by design, because this is obviously how Gesicht feels. And this helps you bond your view with Gesicht as Gesicht continues to unravel this mystery and come closer to the answer. You not only feel happy or suspense towards the end of the story, you feel relieved that you're finally going to know. The 7 most advanced robots. As I said, they're all being targeted for whatever reason. But throughout their story, we get involved and are introduced to each and every one of them. North Number 2's story is just the best in the show, in my humble opinion. This is a standalone story with only loose tie-ins to the main narrative. North Number 2 is a robot who is taking care of an elderly man who's a master musician, but he's also blind. North, being a machine and technically being incapable of feeling anything, still wants to learn music. He wants to put his own body to use in a way that he can create something beautiful instead of doing what his body was designed for, which is destroying things in war. In a somewhat topically relevant way, with the rise of artificial music being incredibly complex at the moment, the musician is in complete opposition of North's wishes, not only as a musician, but in terms of him simply being there. His mere presence upsets him. And this depth isn't unique among the other characters in the story. Almost all get their own character arcs and their stories, which all come to a clean and concise conclusion by the end. But these stories are all interconnected. They serve a similar role as the 7 deadly sins in Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood. Each of these 7 robots add a unique dimension to the story. They embody different aspects of humanity and the human condition or experience, which is a further commentary on the themes of artificial intelligence in the overarching narrative of the story. These complex, emotional beings are able to facilitate such a compelling story. Due to the nature of the killings, these robots are brought together under common cause, making a sort of artificial family of mutual understanding and respect, all being unique in their own way, but also being the most complex versions of their kind. I can only really talk about how it made me feel and how I feel about the characters. If I talk about the narrative, it gives stuff away. I want you to be overloaded just like I was when I watched the show. So that's all I can talk about in terms of the narrative so far. But we can talk about other things. One of the standout features of Pluto is the visualization and the authentic design. And if you enjoyed the uniqueness of the art style of Monster, then you're going to be a very happy fella, because Pluto's art style is basically one-to-one with Monster's. It's great, it's a modern interpretation of the style. I love how some characters, including the main character, have this big European nose. These guys look like humans, characterized humans for sure, but humans. They don't look like cats. Now, I'm not going to say that the animation is revolutionary or something like that, but it is insanely good. There's not much combat or action in the show, but when there is, it's peak. Okay, and it is insanely serviceable for what it's used for: speculation, deduction, and detective work. It's not like a lot of anime I've seen where when someone is explaining something, all we get to see is a mouth move and a panning shot. And you know what I'm talking about. The stories where you just see a character stand there talking about a character's ability or how they can move much faster now and how their ability might work and the complex rule set to it for some reason. If there's any visuals during this period of time, it's usually all in the head, but it pops up and it just shows an image of a previous episode or something, or a previous graphic. Things like that are explained not through flashbacks. There is flashbacks, but not as often as you might think. But they use in-universe things to show those visual things, like a hologram popping up because he's doing detective work. They would clearly have something there that they can look at. So they use that medium to explain with visual guides what Gesicht, or whoever it is at this time, is thinking. And because it's so immersive in that way, it never feels like you're being explained to. Nothing happens off screen. You're there for it. And the stuff that isn't there is the goddamn mystery. We see the entire progression, and that we don't see is the goal of the narrative. In conclusion, Pluto is a remarkable achievement, both in its adaptation of this classic story and as a standalone work in itself. By the way, look at how different they look. It's kind of weird. All in all, the show is just short and very complex and made me cry multiple times. Multiple times I cried about this show. Oh.